If you were trapped on a 2,000-foot radio tower in the middle of the desert and nobody knows where you are, what would you do? I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Tower of Death and fall. This woman is going to be put through hell. Becky and Dan here are scaling this huge cliff face, but just as he's about to anchor himself, a bird flies out of the rocks, startling him. The man loses his grip, and the others watch in shock as he falls, but his safety rope catches him at the last second. He's lucky to be alive, but the anchor is starting to come loose, and it won't hold for much longer. The man begs his wife to unclip him so he'll have enough cable to swing forward, and she quickly follows his instructions, hoping it will save his life. But it's too late. The anchor detaches from the cliffside, and her husband falls straight to his death. It's horrifying. But Becky has no idea that she'll be spending 62 hours trapped on a tower trying to survive 1 year later. The woman is still traumatized by her husband's death and is drowning her sorrows in boobs. But that's when her phone suddenly rings. It's her best friend Hunter, and the woman heads to the front door to let her inside. Catching up with each other, she reveals that Becky's father told her she needed some company, and Hunter here has come to help the girl move on with her life. Showing this picture of a radio tower, she invites the woman to climb it with her, but Becky refuses the invitation. The trauma from her husband's death is still fresh in her memory, and she can't handle the thought of any more climbing. The next morning, she has a change of heart and tells her friend she's ready to take on the challenge. An adventure like this might help her move on with her life. But both of these women are going to wish they stayed at home getting into Hunter's truck. The woman starts recording a video for her YouTube channel, telling her viewers what they're about to do as she drives out to the radio tower. But there's a problem. The gate has been locked, and the girls have no choice but to ditch the car and walk the rest of the way there, trekking towards the tower. Hunter reassures her friendly of everything they need for the climb, except for food. She only plans on staying up there for the morning and thinks they can get lunch afterwards. But that's when her friend sees something horrifying. It's a pair of vultures eating a dying animal, and the women chew the birds off but realize that it's too late to save the creature. It's a brutal way to die, and Hunter takes a photo to post it on Instagram, now realizing that soon they'll be starving to death for the next 3 days. Okay, these friends did not prepare for their climb at all. And even though Hunter here has been planning the trip for weeks, they've already made a huge mistake. If you were about to climb a 2,000-foot radio tower in the middle of the desert, you would have to be a complete idiot to not scout the area first. The fact that they're about to try this without considering the risks is a horrible idea, and if the girls had come just 1 day earlier, they could have solved this problem. If my life was on the line, I would have insisted on assessing the tower's structural stability, the area's cell phone coverage, and even its weather forecasts. This information would have helped them figure out what other ratchets they might have needed, because as we can see here, a simple gate has already added an extra 2-mile hike they didn't plan for. Since people need roughly 17 ounces of water per hour of hiking, they will likely run out an hour earlier than they had planned. And when you're 2,000 feet above the ground in the middle of the desert, that can make the difference between life and death. Now another thing to consider is that expert climbers will actually recommend 8 weeks of training to build strength and endurance before an intense climb. This includes grip and finger strength exercises, which can't be easily trained through regular day-to-day activities instead. Becky here wants to leap straight into climbing after a full year's worth of binge drinking. The only exercise she's been getting is walking home from the bar at 3 in the morning, and it means the girl's incredibly unprepared for this situation. To make things worse, Hunter has told absolutely no one that they plan to climb the tower. This means a car breaking down and a loss of phone signal will leave them stranded, and it was the same mistake made by Aaron Ralston when he got stuck in a canyon for 127 hours. Anyone who's seen that movie would never let the same thing happen to them. But instead, these girls ventured out with no sunscreen, no food, and no backup plan. If it were me, and we were already expecting to risk our lives, I would tell family and friends that if I don't check in with them every 6 hours, they should call 911. Not taking these simple precautions is a recipe for disaster, and soon these girls will regret they ever walked out the front door arriving at the tower. Becky realizes how tall it is, and begins to have second thoughts, telling her friend she can't bring herself to climb it. But the woman encourages her to face her fears. Clipping their harnesses together, they walk up to the tower and taking the hype from below, with no idea that this will all go horribly wrong. Hunter takes the lead and goes up first while her friend follows after her. But neither of them notice how shaky the structure is, until Becky reaches for a rung and the bar breaks off. It becomes clear that this tower is not as strong as they thought, but neither of them are going to quit. They continue climbing, and as Becky looks at the ground below, she suddenly becomes terrified. It's a long way down if she falls, and the woman snaps out of it, pushing herself to climb further up the ladder. But she's already losing her confidence. Panicking, she begs her friend to head back down. But Hunter refuses, insisting that they will be fine. She squeezes herself past the satellite dish and onto the next ladder, while Becky nervously decides to follow her lead. Seeing how scared she is, Hunter starts shaking the ladder to mess with her friend and continues climbing, but doesn't realize that she's just knocked out a bolt, and this was her biggest mistake, reaching a handout. The woman pulls her up, and together they take in the view, celebrating their achievement with photos from their drone. After enjoying themselves, Hunter tells her friend that it's finally time to move on with her life. And Becky agrees. She opens up the box with her husband's ashes and scatters them into the wind. It's a beautiful moment, and the women put their harnesses back on again, making sure they've got everything they need for their descent. Becky here goes down first, but that's when everything goes wrong. The ladder starts to detach itself from the tower, and the rusted metal bent backwards, sending the woman flying. Hunter is pulled by the rope, but manages to catch herself, saving her friends' lives as the ladder tumbles to the earth below. They have no other way of climbing back down, and one wrong move could send them both falling to their deaths. Okay, these girls are completely out of their depth. First of all, it's immediately obvious that this tower is extremely rusty, and the rungs of the ladder are literally falling apart. That's already enough reason to stop climbing. But there's an even bigger problem right now. They're tethered to only each other with a 50-foot rope. And while that might sound like a good idea, it's actually a huge mistake. If one of them loses their grip, then there's nothing to stop her fall except the other girl she's attached to, and they will kill them both. Climbing this thing is a death sentence, but if they still decide to go through with it, then they should have at least followed their rock climbing instincts for the best chance of surviving. Even a junior climber would know that you need to have multiple anchor points when scaling something this high up. That's why instead of being tethered to each other, we should each have our own robe with carabiners and keep at least 2 anchor points at all times during decline. Honestly, if it were me, I wouldn't climb this thing for $1 million. But if I had no choice, the smartest approach would be to clip myself to both the ladder and the nearest beam on the side of the tower. Since the ladder and beams are supported by different parts of the structure, we can reset our clip positions and keep moving up, knowing that a fall will not mean instant death. It's important to point out that this strategy wouldn't work on the second part of the tower, because there aren't any other beams to hold you. But at the very least, hooking 2 carabiners to the ladder is a lot better than nothing. These girls didn't bother thinking this far ahead, and now one of them is dangling 2,000 feet above the ground. With that said, even though this rope has just saved her life, it's possible for Hunter here to lose her balance, and considering how narrow the platform is, the margin for error is extremely small. As long as this carabiner's attached to her body, she's in serious danger of getting pulled to her death. And that's why if it were me, the first thing I would do is pull in the rope, trying to create enough slacks so that I can unhook the carabiner and attach it to the pole. This massively increases our chances of survival because it frees me from the rope, and that way I could try helping my friend to safety without risking both our lives in the process. Thinking quickly, Hunter wraps the rope around the antenna to get a better grip and uses all of her strength to pull her friend up until Becky can finally grab onto of the ladder. Exhausted, she joins her friend back on the platform and is relieved to be alive, but when the women look over the edge, they realize the ladder is gone. It's impossible to climb back down now, and when she pulls at her phone to call for help, the woman sees that they can't get a signal. They're too high up, but Becky suddenly notices something that could save their lives. It's a special compartment box, and inside a pair of binoculars along with a flare gun. They can at least search for help and signal somebody to rescue them. But there's another problem. The backpack with all their supplies is stuck in the satellite dish below, and it's too risky to go get it. Becky starts to panic, knowing they're going to die of thirst. But her friend insists of the sound of the crashing ladder must have been loud enough for someone to hear it, manages to calm her. But that's when Hunter notices a deep wound on her friend's leg. Acting quickly, she takes off her shirt and uses it as a bandage, wrapping it tightly to stop the bleeding. They take a moment to catch their breaths and relax, knowing they'll only be trapped up here until someone comes to save them. It's the only thing that's giving them hope, but they're 2,000 feet in the air surrounded by desert, and nobody knows that they're out here later. Hunter searches their surroundings with the binoculars And that's when she spots an old RV. It's within driving distance of the tower, but Becky thinks it's been abandoned. And to make matters worse, hours have gone by with no sign that help is coming. Getting bored, Hunter scrolls through her Instagram feed when she suddenly remembers that her picture of the dead animal God likes from her followers hopeful. She reminds her friend that there might be a phone signal lowered down, and this gives her an idea. She'll upload a message asking for help on Instagram before attaching her phone to the rope and lower the device until it gets service again. This way all of her followers will see the message and somebody will call the police. With no better ideas, they tie the phone to their climbing rope and reel it below, but it doesn't seem to catch a signal. Okay, this was good thinking. Focusing on getting help through the phone is a great idea. But the girls need to be way more proactive here with 2 phones. They only have a couple of chances to try this experiment, so if we're going to risk dropping them below, we shouldn't just count on Instagram to call for help. The smarter approach is to have SOS us messages queued up on as many apps as possible for someone to see it and come save us. Hunter here has 60,000 followers, so it's very likely she has a presence on other social media platforms as well. If it were me, I'd be opening Facebook, Twitter, or any other apps within offline mode and writing distress messages to my entire contact, texting local emergency services, as well as friends and family only when we've tried alerting as many people as possible, should we dangle the phone over the edge to try catching a signal. Another thing I would do is tie together all of our shoelaces to add extra length to the rope, because the lower we can drop the phone, the more likely we are to get a signal. Each shoelace will give them over 3 feet of usable length, and since we only have a 50-foot rope, this can make a big difference now. It's very possible that we're just too high up for this plan to work, and that means we need to be thinking of ways to attract attention at all times of the day. One of the best ways to do this is by using a reflective surface like their phone screens, or the lenses from the binoculars, and bouncing the sunlight towards buildings or vehicles in the area. If they manage to find one that's close enough, they can use their hands to block the light, creating a repeated pattern of 3 short bursts and 3 long bursts over and over. This spells out SOS and Morse code, and is recognized as the international signal for distress by anyone familiar with the pattern. Then once it gets dark, they can use the flashlight functions on their phones to send out similar signals now. If none of these methods work, there might be one last thing we can try, but it requires a lot more risk. Earlier at the diner, the girls spotted the red light flashing and realized this was the top of the tower they were about to climb. That means at night, this flashing light could be seen for miles in every direction, and as a last resort, we can use this to our advantage. The reason this is here is to prevent low-flying planes from hitting the tower, and if we shimmy up the pole to smash the bulb, it might alert someone that the light has gone out. Since this is an important safety feature, it's possible someone will be sent to replace the bulb as soon as possible, and it gives us a chance of finding help. Hunter decides to climb down and hang from the bottom of the ladder, using her full arm length to get the phone as low as she can, but the woman is losing her grip. It's incredibly dangerous, and she's forced to climb back up, reeling in her phone to check if the plan worked, but nothing was posted. They're disappointed that the plan failed, but that's when Becky points out that they could get a signal on the ground and suggests they drop it, hoping that their message will go through. They look around for something to protect the phone, and Hunter offers one of her shoes to make sure it won't break on impact. Putting the phone inside, they stuff the shoe with extra clothing before dropping it over the edge, and the girls watch as it lands on the ground below. All they can do is wait patiently for help, but that's when the woman takes the binoculars and spots a man in the distance. Excited, they scream as loud as they can to get his attention, but they're too high up for the guy to hear them. Seeing him walk away, they start desperately throwing their shoes down, hoping he'll notice them. Luckily, the man checks on his dog and finds one of the girl's shoes, but instead of looking up, he thinks nothing of it and decides to walk away. Becky realizes this might be their last chance to survive and pulls out the flare gun, but her friend stops her from firing. The stranger is already leaving and won't see the flare. But that's when she suddenly spots another man near the RV. The woman suggests they try signaling for help later when it gets dark, but warns her friend they only have one shot to get this right that night. Becky passes the time by watching her old wedding video when she notices how strange her friend was acting at the ceremony. She doesn't know what to think of it, but is suddenly interrupted when Hunter tells her the men are about to leave. The woman quickly pulls out the gun and fires it, sending the signal flare rocketing into the sky, turning on her phone light. Hunter begins waving it above her head, and it catches the men's attention as they realize the girls are trapped 2,000 feet in the air, They quickly head for the tower, and the women are relieved to finally be getting help. But when the strangers approach Hunter's car, Becky realizes something is wrong. Instead of opening the gate to rescue them, the men steal their vehicle, and the girls watch as they drive away with nothing they can do to stop them. Okay, these girls are luckier than you think. They managed to get the attention of someone down below. And when you're in the middle of a desert, this is a complete miracle. Firing the flare was definitely the right decision to make, because it's easily the most effective way to get someone's attention, and we can't waste the opportunity. The problem is that they just so happen to be heartless criminals. And if that's not a sign that God hates you, that I don't know what is now. The more times these girls try to signal for help, the more of their valuable resources they use up. And this includes our energy so far. They've used every opportunity to scream their heads off trying to get anyone's attention, and it's a huge mistake. Not only are they going to exhaust themselves, but they also don't realize that nobody can hear them at this altitude. You would literally have to use a foghorn for the plant to work. So yelly just isn't worth the effort. It's also worth pointing out that it's very unlikely we would be getting any sleep during the night. This platform is wealthy 1 square meter of space, and you would be constantly waking up terrified that you're about to fall to your death. From this point on, we need to be a lot more strategic with how we use our remaining resources. And that's why if they were me, I would try to use my friend as bait. If you look here, you can see that there are vultures flying overhead. And if they're circling around the tower, it means they're already waiting for us to drop dead. This is great news, because if they've got their eyes on us, we might be able to lure one in and use them to our advantage. First, I would tie myself to the pole, lay down during the day to conserve our energy, and open up Becky's wounds for the vulture to see. These creatures have such good eyesight. They can spot a 3-foot carcass from 4 miles away. So there's no question this bird will be able to see her wound. They've also been known to feed on live prey. So if the vulture comes down to feast, we might be able to grab it. Then we could try strapping our last phone to its back or leg and set it free so that when it touches the ground, our distress messages will be sent, and help will finally come. Now, it's fair to say that this is a total Hail Mary tactic and would be difficult to pull off. But if you had to choose between trying to catch a vulture and climbing down this tower with nothing to hold on to, I think it's worth a try. Later that night, the climbers are resting when one of them is about to fall off the platform. But Becky quickly wakes up, catching her friend at the last second. It was a close call, and Hunter thanks her for the help, but notices that Becky's wound is getting worse. She needs medical attention as soon as possible. But the woman suddenly spots a tattoo on her friend's foot that says 143. That number was important to her husband, and she realizes he was having an affair with her best friend. She demands to know if her suspicions are true, and the woman confesses they had a fling. But she ended it. It's a heartbreaking discovering, driving a wedge between them, and soon one of them is going to die the next morning. The 2 survivors sit in silence, and Becky here decides to take off her wedding ring, looping it onto her necklace. That's when her phone alarm rings, and the girl announces they've been stuck here for 24 hours. They need to think of something quick, or else they'll die, and Hunter suggests they throw the other phone down. But it didn't work the first time. The device will most likely shatter on impact. But there's still something we haven't tried yet. That's when the woman realizes that it might be possible to get her bag with a drone inside, and this way they can use it to search for help without any better ideas. Hunter begins to descend the tower and reaches the end of her rope. The bag is still out of reach. And that's when she decides to unclog up the harness hanging off the rope to cover more distance, risking her life. She swings towards the bag and manages to land on the satellite as her friend watches from above, but the ladder has completely fallen off the tower and she can't climb down any further. Putting the backpack on, Hunter realizes she can't reach the rope anymore and is forced to back away, but pulls out her selfie stick, coming up with a clever plan. She tells her friend that she'll hook the bag onto the rope hitch before jumping on so that Becky can pull her back up. It's a crazy plan, but with no better ideas, Hunter attaches the backpack and decides to take the biggest risk of her life. Bracing herself, she beeps forward and hangs onto the bag with all her strengths, instructing her friend to pull the rope while she tries to climb up, working together. Becky reels the line in, and the woman reaches out to grab onto the nearby rung. But suddenly, her foot slips and she loses her grip. The woman is sent plummeting through the air, and Becky is horrified that her friend might have just died. Okay, this is terrifying. Hunter has just fallen off the rope, and it means Becky might be completely on her. Oh, it's tragic, but there could actually be a silver lining here. So far, they've been trying every possible way to get attention, but throwing your shoes just won't be enough to get the job done. It's way too easy to overlook, but a dead body would make a huge difference. Anyone who comes trekking in this direction will notice her corpse and call the authorities immediately. So as sad as the situation might become, it actually improves our chances of survival. With that said, this girl was far braver than I would have been. She risked her life to get the backpack they dropped. And what's amazing is that she actually managed to reach it, but nobody stopped to think about how to get back up. This is exactly why Hunter shouldn't have jumped off the rope, and I wouldn't be risking my life like this unless we had a strategy to get back to the ground. Now this backpack is definitely useful because they still have a drone inside they could use to get help. And that's why if it were me, I would be looking for any way I could to fashion a hook so we can grab the bag without ever leaving the rope. It might be difficult with the resources they have left. But if the girls had been smarter and kept at least one pair of shoes, then this would clearly be the best tool for the job. First, I would take the shoelaces out. I'd use one of them to tie the toes together through the eyelets. Then the second shoelace can be used for us to swing our new hook and try catching it on the backpack's shoulder strap. It might be a long shot, but if they had done this, Hunter here wouldn't have gotten herself stranded on the satellite dish. Now the girl thoughts used the selfie stick so she could attach the backpack and jump onto the rope. But nobody stopped to realize that Becky here could have just moved the rope to the left this way. It would have lined up right above her friend, and she wouldn't have needed to risk jumping again. It's also possible that they could have gotten the rope within Hunter's reach. If you look here, you can see that the rope is looped around the pole with several knots, and is stretching out at least half a meter to go around the platform. If it were me, I would have unhooked the rope and attached it to the furthest bar on the edge. This one simple fix could have added as much as 5 feet to the rope's length, and it's very likely that would be enough for Hunter here to reach it. Peeking over the platform, she's surprised to see her friend desperately hanging onto the bag, but her hands have become so injured from the fall that she can't climb up with the girl's life at stake. Becky uses all of her strength and pulls on the rope until her friend finally makes it back to the platform. Relieved, she quickly takes a sip from the water bottle, having her first drink in over a day. But Hunter reminds the woman they need to fly the drone out for help before it gets dark. Becky takes out a receipt and uses her friend's eyeliner to write a message explaining where they are and attaches it to the drone. Hunter points to a road that leads to a nearby motel. And activating autopilots, they watch it fly away, but there's a problem. Its battery is beginning to die out and they need to retrieve it immediately, or else it's going to crash. Nervous, Becky orders it to return, and the drone flies back as she manages to catch it right before it runs out of power. It was a close call, but they don't have a spare battery. And it seems like things are looking more hopeless by the minute that night. Becky wakes up to find that her friend has disappeared, and begins to panic as she looks around to figure out what happened. A vulture suddenly attacks her from the air, and that's when she sees the woman lying dead on the platform. It's terrifying, but is jolted away from her nightmare to hear Hunter calming her down, and is relieved to see she's alive, coming to her senses. The girl notices they've been illuminated by a blinking red glow, and that's when she realized they can charge the drone using the light above them the next morning. Becky puts in the bag and begins to climb the pole, hopeful that this will save their lives. Using all of her strength, she manages to reach the top and unscrews the cover to remove the bulb before inserting the prongs of the drone charger into the socket. But it's not working. They aren't long enough to reach, and Hunter tells the girl that she needs to put something metal inside so the power can be conducted. Thinking quickly, she takes off her gold wedding ring and sticks it in before jamming the prong back into the socket. Suddenly the drone begins to charge, but it's going to take a while, and Becky has no choice but to stay on top until it's finished. Okay, this was great thinking. The girl recognized that all they needed to do was stick the prongs to the socket to charge the drone. It's incredibly resourceful. And tactically, as long as the voltage is correct, it might actually work. But there's a huge problem. This drone is called a Skydo 2, and it takes about 2 hours to charge its batteries. But Becky here might not be able to last that long right now. The girl has been stranded here for 2 full days without anything to eat and an open wound that hasn't been treated. She's also virtually had no sleep at all, and the stress of the situation will be putting her nervous system into complete overload. The girl is in no shape to be hanged from a pole for 2 hours, but there might be a better way to get this done if they were me. I would have tried taking my shirt off and carefully laid it over the charger, wrapping the rest of it around the pole. You can see here that there's even a hook we can use to secure the shirt, and this would help us make sure the charger doesn't come loose. Then I would take a backpack and tie the shoulder and compression straps to the pole as well, making sure it's fixed as tightly as possible. Once I'm convinced that the bag isn't going to fall, I would climb back down and rest waiting for the drone to finish charging with that. Said we still have to consider that this plan might not work. It's already been 48 hours, and the weaker we get, the less likely we are to survive long enough for someone to rescue us. That's why at this point, if something happens to the drone, I'd be putting all my remaining energy into figuring out how to climb back down now. Even though the ladder fell off, it's only for Hunter over the edge sending her plummeting below. It's the only way to make sure she gets help. And if this plan doesn't work, the girl is as good as dead. Later that night, Becky's dad is driving on the road frantically looking for his daughter and heads to the TV tower as fast as possible. He's received her message but arrives at the scene to find emergency services already backing up a dead body. The man begins to break down in tears, think he needs come too late. But that's when a voice calls out to him and the dad sees his daughter is still alive. They're so relieved to see each other again, and it's a heartwarming moment though. They've both learned a valuable lesson: humans should always stay on the ground. But what do you think? How would you beat fall? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe and check out the How to Be playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.